Sometimes the cold doesn't come from the snow outside, but from the silence that answers when you call a name you love. The frozen ground tore at John Carter's bare hands as he clawed through 2 feet of Colorado snow. His flashlight beam sliced frantic arcs through the December blizzard, but it revealed nothing, only white emptiness and the faint echo of his own ragged breath. The temperature had plunged below -15, yet John didn't feel the cold anymore. All he felt was the hollow panic rising in his chest. 37 minutes. That's how long his 14-month-old daughter had been missing. Lily, his voice cracked, swallowed by the wind that hadn't stopped howling since sunset. Lily, no answer. Only the storm. Only his own heartbeat hammering against the numb cage of his ribs. Blood smeared the snow, where his knuckles split against frozen earth. His wedding ring glinted faintly in the flashlight's beam, the last thing he hadn't sold to keep them afloat. He clenched his hand tight around it. Not again, his mind screamed. Please, God, not again. Then through the roaring wind he heard something. Not Lily's voice. Something else. A shape moved through the darkness, glinting faintly in the beam like amber eyes staring back. John froze. The storm seemed to hold its breath. 3 weeks earlier, none of this had existed. No storm, no panic, no blood in the snow. Back then, the Carter family cabin had almost looked peaceful under the first heavy snowfall of the season. Weathered pine siding, a sagging roof that needed repairs they couldn't afford. Smoke curling from the chimney, the scent of burning wood, a reminder of warmth they struggled to keep. 15 miles outside Colorado Springs, isolation had once felt like freedom. Now it felt like abandonment. Inside, the kitchen table was buried under bills. Red ink scrawled across envelopes marked final notice. Grace Carter stood at the stove, stirring oatmeal, her brown hair tied back in a messy ponytail she hadn't bothered to fix in days. At 36, she looked older. Exhaustion had carved itself into her bones. Across from her, John sat with a stack of unopened envelopes. His calloused carpenter's hands trembled as he shuffled through debts he already knew they couldn't pay. At 38, he still carried the lean build of his army days, but the spark behind his eyes had dimmed. 2 tours in Afghanistan had taught him how to stay calm under fire, yet nothing had prepared him for this kind of battle. Their daughter, Lily, sat in her high chair, 14 months old, blonde curls, eyes the color of ice, but her gaze never found theirs. She didn't babble, didn't point, didn't react when they called her name. She stared into a world far away from theirs, a world only she could see. She had stopped making sounds 6 weeks ago. Margaret Carter, John's 72-year-old mother, hummed softly at the counter, folding laundry. Early Alzheimer's had brought her to live with them. Most days she was herself. Some days she wasn't. Today, thankfully, she was. The mail's here, John murmured as he heard the truck outside. Grace didn't answer. She didn't need to. The mail only meant more bad news. John stepped into the biting cold, boots crunching against ice. He opened the mailbox and pulled out a thick envelope. Rocky Mountain Bank. He didn't need to open it to know what it said, but he did anyway. Final notice. 30 days to pay $12,147.32, or foreclosure proceedings would begin. Deadline, January 1st. When he stepped back inside, Grace saw his face and knew. Without a word, she pulled an envelope from the drawer, one she had been hiding for 3 days. There's more, she whispered. Children's Hospital, Denver, Department of Neurology. John's chest tightened as she slid the paper toward him. Balance due, $8,347, specialized testing their insurance had denied. Pre-existing condition. Lily's diagnosis, whatever it was, didn't fit into a box insurance companies cared about. John did the math in his head. Over $21,000 owed. His savings? $347.18. He'd already sold his truck, his tools, even his wedding ring. Grace didn't know that part yet. Maggie looked up from her laundry. The Lord will provide, son, she said softly. John said nothing. He just stared at his daughter, who stared at nothing at all. That morning, the phone rang while John stood in his empty workshop, the ghost of sawdust and cedar still hanging in the air. The caller ID froze his breath. Eden Webb. Not the Eden who died 9 years ago in Afghanistan. Another Edon. An old army buddy who now worked at a K-9 training facility in Denver. They hadn't spoken in 2 years. John, man. I know it's been a while, Eden began. I need a favor. Well, maybe you need one too. I'm not in a position for favors, John muttered. Just hear me out. I've got a dog, Ranger, German Shepherd. 5 years old. Retired military K-9. He's complicated. John frowned. How complicated? Injured in his last deployment. Throat damage from a blast. Can't bark anymore. PTSD episodes. The facility can't keep him. He's too unpredictable. Eden paused, his tone heavy. Honestly, John, he's given up. Just stares at walls. I've seen that look before. In men who don't make it back. John's hand moved unconsciously to the scar on his shoulder, where shrapnel still lived under his skin. Eden, I can't. We can barely feed ourselves. He's free. I'll bring food. Just meet him tomorrow. What's one day? That night over dinner, one package of ramen split between 4 people. John told Grace. Absolutely not, she said sharply. Are you out of your mind? Dog food costs money. Vet bills cost money. What if it bites, Lily? What if it snaps? Grace, John pleaded softly. He's free. Nothing is free, she snapped, turning from the stove. I can't save one more thing, John. I'm trying to save our daughter and I'm failing. Her voice cracked. I can't. I just can't. He pulled her close as she broke into quiet sobs. Okay, he whispered. I'll tell Eden no. But that night, long after Grace fell asleep, John lay awake staring at the ceiling. He thought about that look Eden had described, the one in men who've lost the will to fight. He'd seen it lately, too. In the mirror, at 2 a.m., he picked up his phone and texted, "What time tomorrow?" The next day, in a gray parking lot surrounded by chain-link fences, John met Ranger. The dog was massive, black and tan coat, strong build, intelligent eyes. But those eyes were hollow. He doesn't bark, Eden explained. His throat was damaged. Vet says he makes sound, just not one we can hear. Maybe only dogs can. The animal looked at John, holding his gaze for a long, quiet moment. Something flickered. Recognition, maybe. Or hope. I'll take him, John said quietly. Just for a week. Driving home, the snow began to fall again. The mountains blurred behind a curtain of white. When they pulled up to the cabin, Grace was waiting on the porch. Arms crossed, eyes full of disbelief. John, no. 1 week, he said gently. If it doesn't work, he goes back. Before she could answer, Maggie appeared holding Lily, who was crying, a sound they hadn't heard from her in days. John opened the back door. Ranger stepped out, careful on the ice, and sat down perfectly still. Then his mouth opened, throat moving silently. Lily stopped crying, her tiny head turned, fast, focused. For the first time, she was responding. Oh my God, Grace whispered. Lily reached out toward the dog, eyes wide, hands trembling in the cold air between them. John's breath caught. Grace, she heard him. Grace shook her head in disbelief, but he didn't make a sound. Maggie's voice trembled. Maybe she hears what we don't, honey. Maybe that's been the problem all along. And in that fragile moment, in the silence that followed, something impossible had just begun. Sometimes, the miracles we search for don't come from medicine or science. They come from the quiet connection between two souls who were never meant to meet, yet somehow did. Grace's voice cut through the living room like a blade. This is crazy, John. We need actual help. Medical help, not a dog who can't even bark properly. John's reply was firm but weary. This is help. Look at her, Grace. She's engaged, really engaged, for the first time in months. Their argument rose and fell like waves crashing against a fragile piece. From her playpen, little Lily watched them both, her wide eyes shifting between her parents, understanding something, just not in words, and then quietly, Ranger moved. The old service dog, once broken by fear and noise, stood and padded toward the playpen. He lay down beside it, close enough that Lily could reach through the bars if she wanted to, and she did. Her tiny hand reached out, fingers spreading like soft rays of sunlight, pressing against the dog's head. Ranger's tail began to move, slow, steady, like a heartbeat. Then it happened. A sound and soft, certain, fragile, escaped Lily's lips. Not a word, but a coo, the first sound she'd made in 6 long weeks. All 3 adults froze. Time itself seemed to stop. That night, long after Grace had gone to bed, her anger cooling into exhaustion, John sat in the rocking chair, watching his daughter sleep. Ranger lay on the floor between the chair and the crib, silent, still, watchful. At midnight, Lily stirred. She began to fuss, the small whimpers of discomfort that usually turned into screams. But before they could, Ranger lifted his head, walked to the crib, opened his mouth, and then closed it. No sound came out, yet Lily stopped fussing instantly. She cooed again, that same melodic little hum, and reached for him through the crib bars. John's breath caught. He lifted her carefully into his arms. Normally she stiffened, a child locked away in her own world, but tonight she was calm. He sat on the floor beside Ranger, tears filling his eyes as Lily rested her small hand on the dog's head. She made another sound, longer this time, rising and falling, almost like music. John began to cry. Silent, trembling tears, the first since Eden's death 9 years ago. He looked at his daughter and whispered, voice breaking, I don't know what you hear, baby girl, but I'm going to figure it out. I promise. In the hallway, unseen, Grace stood watching. Her hand rested on her stomach, where a new, unspoken secret was growing. She, too, was crying. Morning came cold and pale. December sunlight slipping weakly through the kitchen windows. Grace moved with quiet purpose, pouring coffee, her face composed but her heart storming. I called Dr. Morrison, she said. We have an appointment Friday. I'm bringing Ranger. John looked up from his untouched toast. You want to bring the dog to the neurologist? If she can hear him, and not us, we need to know why, Grace said, steady now. We need documentation. She didn't say the rest out loud, but both knew what she meant. For when Child Protective Services comes asking questions. She pulled an envelope from her purse, $400 in 20s. I sold Grandma's sapphire ring. John's voice cracked. Grace, no. It was metal and stone, she interrupted, hard as steel. Lily is flesh and blood, and my daughter. Now get ready. We're fighting for her. For the first time in months, they were on the same side. Denver Children's Hospital rose like a fortress of glass and concrete. Inside, the pediatric neurology wing glowed in false cheer. Bright walls painted with cartoon animals that couldn't hide the smell of antiseptic and fear. Dr. William Morrison, silver-haired and sharply pressed, looked up from Lily's file. I wasn't informed you were bringing an animal. He's wearing a service vest, John said. Though it wasn't exactly true. He's part of her treatment. I determine treatment, Mr. Carter, the doctor replied coldly. Grace pulled out her tablet. Then watch this first. She played the video, Lily unresponsive to everything, until Ranger opened his mouth. Each time he did, Lily turned, smiled, reached out. 7 minutes of undeniable proof. Dr. Morrison watched silently, then removed his glasses, cleaning them with his tie. Coincidental behavior, he said. Children with autism often fixate on animals. She doesn't respond to anything else, Grace said, voice cracking. Confirmation bias, the doctor snapped. You're seeing what you want to see. Then test her. Right now. Minutes later, the room filled with sterile light and tension. The nurse clapped, rang a bell, dropped a heavy book. Lily didn't react. Not even a flinch. Dr. Morrison scribbled notes. Profound hearing impairment, likely congenital. Then John spoke softly. Let Ranger try. This is not scientific methodology. Please, Grace whispered, breaking. Just please. The nurse gave a quiet signal. Ranger opened his mouth. No sound humans could hear, but Lily's head turned instantly. Her little arms reached out, cooing with joy. 5 attempts. 5 perfect responses. Dr. Morrison's pen stopped moving. His face drained of color. This is not possible, he muttered. Moments later, his voice rose, defensive, angry. Coincidence. You are risking your child's life believing in miracles instead of science. Leave my office. They were escorted out by security. In the car, Grace wept, clutching Lily. He's going to report us. They'll take her away. John's knuckles went white on the steering wheel. We're doing the right thing. But fate wasn't done testing them. The next morning, a bright orange notice clung to their front door. Final power disconnection, December 15th. Temperatures were expected to drop to -18. And just as hope thinned, a stranger arrived, a woman with a sleek coat and a colder heart. I'm Martha, she said. Remember the $5,000 loan? You now owe $7,800. 10 days, Grace. Don't disappoint me. When John came home, he found Grace crying over the papers. How could you not tell me? Because someone had to try, she shouted through tears. You've given up, John. I haven't. Maggie's voice echoed from the hallway. Stop it. Both of you. But their pain was too deep, their fear too loud. That night, Grace was sick, morning sickness, finally too strong to hide. I'm pregnant, she whispered. The words hit like thunder. John sat on the cold bathroom floor, overwhelmed by fear, guilt, and love. Grace looked at him broken. Give me one reason to believe this will be okay. He had no answer. Days later, Eden appeared, not as a friend, but as a scientist. $10,000 for exclusive rights to study Lily and Ranger. A solution. Or a trap. John read the fine print. Saw the truth. You didn't reconnect out of friendship. You used us. Eden's mask dropped. Don't be stupid, John. Sign or lose everything, including Ranger. The punch came before John even realized he'd thrown it. That night, silence. Grace and John sat staring at the contract, the weight of it all pressing down. A devil's bargain, but maybe their only chance. And then, the next evening, an explosion of sound. Fireworks. Too early. Too loud. Ranger panicked. PTSD triggered. Growling. Teeth bared. John moved to calm him, but the dog snapped. And then, through the chaos, Lily toddled in. Her tiny hand touched Ranger's head, and from her lips came a sound. High, shimmering, beyond human range. Ranger froze, then melted. His growl faded into a whine, then into peace. Her voice, or whatever it was, had reached him. Grace covered her mouth, trembling. John whispered, she's not just hearing differently, she's speaking differently. Sometimes the most extraordinary conversations happen in frequencies the human heart feels. But the human ear can't hear. Maggie stood quietly in the doorway, her eyes glassy with wonder. That child, she whispered, voice trembling. She's speaking the language of angels. Lily sat on the floor beside Ranger, her tiny hand resting on his fur. There were no words, only soft hums, vibrations, a rhythm only the two of them seemed to share. Grace had seen it before, but never like this. Her nanny cam had captured every second. Clear footage of Lily calming the dog that even trained handlers couldn't control. The discovery was both miracle and curse. It proved Ranger could be dangerous in the wrong situation, but it also showed Lily had a gift nobody could explain. John stared at the footage late into the night, wondering whether this would be evidence for them or against them when Child Protective Services came. Still, they decided to tell the truth. It was all they had left. December 15th arrived. bringing not one storm, but many. At 7 a.m., the power company cut their electricity. Grace had forgotten to pay the bill amid the chaos. The house froze within hours, every breath visible in the icy air. John ran next door to borrow a phone, his boots crunching through snow. He pleaded for an extension, denied. His credit score, 487. No bank would help. Grace tried to start her car, dead. A battery drained to nothing. By noon, Lily's forehead burned. Fever, 102.3. She needed a doctor, but they had no car, no power, no phone. Just a dying generator and the howling wind outside. John looked at his daughter wrapped in blankets, her little body shivering. There was no time to think, only act. He pulled on his old army coat and began walking, 4 miles through the storm, to the nearest clinic. Ranger followed close behind, silent, determined. The wind cut like knives. The temperature was 12 degrees with wind chill. Each breath scorched John's throat. As snow thickened, dark thoughts crept in. Eden had died because of him. His mother was slipping into confusion. His wife was losing hope. His daughter lived in silence. Maybe they'd all be better off without him. His military life insurance would pay out. Maybe that was his only way to help. 2.5 hours later, they stumbled into the clinic. John collapsed against the counter, lips blue, eyes hollow. Insurance. The receptionist asked. No, he gasped. But please, she's sick. I have $11. A nurse appeared. Carla, mid-50s, eyes soft but weary. She took one look at Lily and nodded. Let me see her. Minutes later, her diagnosis came. Ear infection. Treatable, but she needed antibiotics. The prescription? $60. John broke. His sobs filled the small exam room. Carla placed a hand on his shoulder. Pay me back when you can, she said gently, swiping her card without hesitation, a spark of kindness in an ocean of despair. Dr. Patterson, the clinic director, gave them a ride home. But when he saw their powerless, freezing house, Grace pale, Maggie lost, his expression changed. I'm required to report this, he said quietly. Adult and Child Protective Services. Please, John begged. We already have an appointment in 3 days. Just give us until then. After a long pause, Patterson sighed. Tomorrow. If the power isn't on by tomorrow, I'll make the call. 1 day to fix everything or lose it all. That night, the storm deepened. Germán sat alone in the workshop, the old hunting rifle hanging above him. He took it down, the metal cold against his palms. For the first time in weeks, his hands didn't shake. Inside, Grace sang Silent Night to Lily. Her voice cracked on every other word, soft and trembling through the thin walls. $250,000 in life insurance. Enough to erase the debt, move somewhere warm, start over, without him. He was the problem. He'd always been the problem. He loaded the rifle, then unloaded, then loaded again. At 11:43 p.m., the door creaked open. Ranger padded in, silent but sure. He sat in front of John, pressed his head against the rifle. I can't hear you, boy, John whispered. Nobody can hear me either. Then a sound, soft footsteps. Lily appeared in the doorway in her little footed pajamas, eyes half open. Hair tangled like spun gold. She made that sound again, the high one, the one John could barely hear, like wind chimes on a faraway mountain. The gun slipped from his hands. Lily walked over and placed one hand on Ranger, one on her father's cheek. Then came another sound, one John couldn't hear at all, but he felt it, like warmth spreading through his chest. Comfort, love, understanding. She'd come to save him. Grace burst in moments later, eyes wide. She saw the gun, the tears, her husband crumbling with their daughter and dog between him. No words were needed. She just knelt and wrapped them all in her arms, a family of 4, clinging to each other in the cold darkness, finding warmth in the only place left. At 2 a.m., the storm quieted. Grace made tea on the camping stove while John held Lily close. Candles flickered across the room, throwing soft shadows over tired faces. I almost left you all tonight, John said. Grace didn't flinch. I know, I almost took Lily and left you last week. They looked at each other, fragile honesty bridging the silence. What do we have left? She asked. John scribbled a list, $11 cash, $843 from the church, a broken car, a cabin for 16 more days. Each other, Ranger, Lily's gift. Then Maggie shuffled in, wrapped in her bathrobe, eyes momentarily lost. But then clarity returned. That doctor, she said softly. He's grieving. You can't fight a man like that. You have to reach him. Grace and John exchanged a glance. Could it be true? They searched Dr. Morrison's name online. The results stopped their hearts. A 2015 headline. Local doctor loses son to rare condition. Michael Morrison, 23, gone too soon. The obituary said he heard the world differently. Grace dug deeper, uncovering the doctor's early research, studies on atypical hearing, sensory perception. Groundbreaking work, until it suddenly stopped. His last paper from 2014 read, The Dangers of Pursuing Unproven Sensory Theories. He gave up. John murmured. Or someone made him. Maggie leaned forward. He's punishing himself, trying to save your daughter from what he couldn't save his own from. Grace's eyes glistened. Then maybe we can save both. They decided to bring Morrison the truth. Lily's recordings, Ranger's data, their research. But by 4 a.m., John realized they needed more, real medical proof, and Morrison had the equipment. He would break in. Grace tried to stop him, but he kissed her forehead gently. If this works, Lily gets a future. If it doesn't, promise me you'll take care of her. And then, with Ranger at his side, John disappeared into the snowy night. Sometimes, the fight for love doesn't begin with enemies. It begins with those who claim they're trying to help. The cold December air hung heavy as Grace stood in the living room, her arms protectively around Lily. Across from her, the CPS officer's tone was calm, but every word struck like a verdict. Additionally, Ranger must be removed from the home until he's properly certified as a service dog, or until you provide evidence he's safe. Grace's voice trembled, though she tried to sound firm. He's part of her treatment. You can't take him, the woman sighed. Then get him certified. You have 2 weeks, Mrs. Carter. After that, he goes. John walked in just as the conversation ended. The sight of the CPS vehicles outside made his chest tighten. He'd seen enough of those cars to know they never brought peace. But instead of breaking down, he took out his phone, his last shred of proof. I have something you need to see, he said, holding out the device. On the screen played the footage from Dr. Morrison's equipment, the sound waves, the readings, and Lily's astonishing reactions. Dr. Morrison is preparing a medical report, John said, praying that was true. She's not disabled, she's differently abled. Martha, the CPS officer, leaned in, her professional mask faltering for a moment. Her eyes softened, maybe with curiosity, maybe with something close to belief. Have Dr. Morrison send me that report, she said quietly. But until then, my requirements stand. Weekly visits, therapy enrollment within 30 days, and Ranger certified within 2 weeks. She handed them her card, then paused at the door. I don't want to take your daughter, Mr. and Mrs. Carter. Help me help you keep her. When the door shut, the silence broke them. Grace sank onto the couch, tears spilling freely. John joined her, and Lily crawled between them. Ranger rested his head on Grace's feet, the quiet guardian. We're running out of time, Grace whispered. Then we stop running, John said. We fight together. No more secrets. Grace took his hand, the spark of something long lost flickering again. No more running. They kissed, soft, desperate, real. For the first time in months, they were on the same side. But the world wasn't waiting. Later that day, John drove across town, snow whispering against the windshield. He'd found Dr. Morrison's address, a sterile, perfect house in South Denver that looked like it belonged to someone who'd traded life for order. When Morrison opened the door, surprise turned quickly to dread. Mr. Carter, he said, voice cold. I'm calling the police. I broke into your office, John said bluntly. Morrison froze. I know. Security called me. I found Michael's files. The color drained from the doctor's face. He hesitated, then opened the door wider. Get inside. Now. The home was immaculate, but empty of warmth. No family laughter, no clutter, just the faint smell of antiseptic and regret. On the mantel sat a single photograph. A boy with dark hair and curious eyes, smiling. Michael, you had no right to look at those files, Morrison said quietly, but there was no anger left in his voice. And you had no right to project your grief onto my daughter, John replied. The words hung in the air, raw and unfiltered. Morrison sat heavily in a leather chair, his hands trembling. Michael was 3 when I tested him, he said, staring into the distance. He could hear beyond normal range. It was real, but when I published my findings, the medical community destroyed me. They called me a fraud. His voice cracked. My wife left, said I was obsessed, that I was sacrificing our son for fairy tales. John's voice softened. So you stopped? I did, Morrison whispered. They told me to make him normal. Therapy, medication, everything to dull what made him different. He stopped talking when he was 8. Selective mutism, they said. But I knew the truth. He'd just given up speaking in a world that couldn't hear him. He paused, staring at the snow falling outside. When he was 15, I tried again. Tried to make him see that his gift wasn't a curse. But it was too late. He told me I'd stolen his voice just to make myself comfortable. The silence was unbearable. John's throat tightened. The suicide note, he said softly. Morrison turned, tears finally spilling. You read it too. He was 23. Overdose. His note said I'd taken away the only language he understood. 2 fathers, separated by decades, bound by the same unbearable loss. When you brought Lily into me, Morrison continued, I saw Michael. Same age, same gift, and I panicked. If I admitted it was real, I'd have to admit I destroyed my own son for nothing. John pulled out a USB drive and placed it in Morrison's hand. You weren't wrong, he said. Your research was right. Lily can hear between 40 and 45 kilohertz. Ranger produces sound in that exact range. This is real, Doctor. You can still make it right. Morrison stared at the drive, trembling. If I do this, I'll lose everything. My career, my license. John's tone softened, but his words hit hard. You already lost everything. You just haven't buried it yet. This is your chance to resurrect it, to save Lily, to honor Michael. The old doctor looked at his son's picture, frozen forever at 8 years old. After a long silence, he whispered, "What do you need? Bring Lily to your private clinic tomorrow, somewhere controlled. Safe. You can prove this once and for all." Morrison nodded slowly. "Tomorrow, 9 a.m. I'll bring Dr. Helen Crawford. She's an audiologist I trust. She believes in what science can't yet explain." As John turned to leave, Morrison's voice cracked behind him. "Mr. Carter." "I'm sorry." "For everything," John paused. "Help my daughter." That's all the apology I need. Driving home, the night felt less suffocating. Not hope exactly, but possibility. For the first time in weeks, the future wasn't just darkness. But when he reached the house, Grace's pale face met him at the door. "Eden was here," she whispered. "He installed cameras, says he owns the footage. The contract gives him rights to film everything." John's chest burned. "What do you mean, everything?" "Our bedroom, Lily's room, all of it. And John," her voice broke, "there's a clause that gives him partial custody for research purposes." The world tilted. Rage surged. "Where is he?" "I threw him out," Grace said. "But he left the cameras. Said if we remove them, we owe $50,000 in penalties." They stood surrounded by cold, blinking lights, the silent watchers of their downfall. "We'll figure it out," John said, though the words felt empty. That night, his mother had another foggy spell. She thought Lily was her long-lost daughter, Sarah. She cried apologies for ghosts that had long since faded. When she came back to herself, her eyes were wet with fear. "I'm disappearing, John," she whispered. "You're still here, Mom." "Not for long," she said. "When I'm gone, remember what I told you. That child speaks a language we've forgotten. Don't let them silence her." He held her as the house fell silent around them. All he could do was hold on. To his mother, his wife, his child, and pray that morning would come soon enough. December 16th arrived too fast. Morrison's clinic at 9 a.m., CPS at 3, Eden's deadline in 2 days, the loan shark in 4, the mortgage in 16, everything closing in at once. Grace, pale and trembling, could barely stand. "I can't go like this," she whispered. "Then I'll take her alone." "No," she said, forcing herself upright. "We do this together." They arrived at the clinic just before 9. Dr. Helen Crawford waited, calm and kind-eyed. "Thank you for trusting us," Morrison said. "This will take time." Lily sat in Grace's lap, Ranger beside her like a soldier at guard. The tests began, and what they revealed would change everything. Sometimes the most powerful voices are the ones the world can't hear. "Lily, can you touch your nose?" The words came softly through the speaker, inaudible to any human ear, resonating at 40 clairs. Lily blinked, smiled faintly, and touched her nose. "Lily, can you clap your hands?" She clapped. "Lily, can you wave hello?" She waved, her face lighting up like sunrise. 5 commands. 5 perfect responses. No hesitation. No confusion. Just understanding, and pure and immediate. Grace couldn't hold it together anymore. Tears streamed down her face. "She understands," she whispered. "She's always understood. We just weren't speaking her language." John stood frozen, both hands pressed against his mouth, tears flooding his eyes. His daughter, the little girl the world had labeled broken, wasn't lost inside herself. She'd been trying to communicate all along. It was them who hadn't been listening. Even Dr. Morrison, the man who'd spent his life in science, couldn't stop his own tears. But he didn't stop working. His trembling hands recorded every moment. The video, the audio, the data that would rewrite everything. He ran the analysis. Audio spectrograms lit up on his screen, showing Lily's high-frequency vocalizations and Ranger's ultrasonic responses perfectly aligned. The two were speaking a language no one else could hear. "I'm writing a comprehensive medical report," Morrison said through quiet sobs. 47 pages if I include all documentation. He paused, then added softly, "My conclusion. Lily presents verified hearing capability outside normal human range, specifically between 25 and 45 kilohertz, with peak sensitivity at 40. This isn't a disability. It's a neurological variation. She doesn't need correction. She needs translation." John stared at him. "What will this cost you?" Morrison smiled sadly. "Everything, probably. The medical board will investigate. My colleagues will call me insane again." He looked at a framed photo on the table. Michael, his lost son. "But I'm not doing this for them. I'm doing this for Michael. And for Lily." He turned toward the family, voice trembling. "In my report, I'll call it Morrison-Carter syndrome. After Michael, because he deserves to be remembered. And after Lily, because she's proving what I couldn't prove 30 years ago." John's voice broke. "After Michael," he repeated softly. He deserves that. Then Morrison did something no one expected. He sat on the floor beside Lily, pulling up an old audio file, Michael's voice from decades ago. He'd never been able to listen to it until now. He used his equipment to shift the voice into Lily's frequency range and pressed play. A faint vibration filled the room, silent to human ears. But Lily froze, eyes wide with recognition. Through the speaker came the voice of a boy long gone. "Hi, my name is Michael. You're not alone." Lily tilted her head, stared at the speaker, then smiled, and answered with a long, melodic sound in her own range. It was a conversation across time and death. One special child reaching another. Morrison broke down completely, sobbing into his hands. Grace knelt beside him, holding him like a grieving parent who'd finally found peace. John stood holding Lily. Ranger pressed against his legs. They were all connected. By loss, by love, and by a truth that had taken too long to hear. By 3 p.m., Morrison's report was finished. He sent it everywhere. To CPS, the medical board, every neurological and autism research journal that mattered. He knew he was burning bridges. "They can take my license," he said quietly, "but they can't take the truth anymore." But fate wasn't done testing them. When John and Grace returned home that evening, their world shattered again. "Aggie," John's mother, was in her room, unresponsive. Grace found her first. The scream that followed shook the house. John called 911. Performing CPR while the operator's voice echoed through the phone. But one look at Maggie's still body told him the truth. 12 minutes later, the paramedics confirmed it. A massive stroke, quick, painless, final. John sat on the floor of his mother's room, broken. Just yesterday, he'd been ready to end his own life. Now his mother was gone. Grace clutched Lily, who was crying audibly, a rare sound for her. Ranger lay across the doorway, refusing to move. As if guarding Maggie's spirit, the night blurred into phone calls and paperwork, funeral arrangements, relatives who hadn't called in years suddenly offering condolences. Amid it all, Grace found something, a stack of 18 letters Maggie had written, one for every person she loved. Dated, sealed, waiting. She'd been preparing for the day she might forget them, but death had come first. One letter was for Lillian to be opened on her 18th birthday. Grace locked it away safely. John's letter was simple. "My dearest boy, your father would be proud. You're stronger than you know. Don't let the world tell you who your daughter is. You already know her. Trust that. I love you forever. Check the cookie jar. Mom." Inside the cookie jar, John found $340, Maggie's entire savings. Every penny she'd saved for them. He held the money and wept. Even in death, she was still taking care of them, but grief didn't wait its turn. 2 days later, Eden showed up with lawyers, furious, desperate, demanding $50,000 in ownership of all Lily's footage. "You ruined my career," he snapped. "My PhD's been suspended. This is on you." John's voice was cold. "You tried to buy our daughter. We won't give you a single thing." Eden left behind a lawsuit and a 30-day deadline. That same afternoon, CPS arrived. Martha Martinez was all business. Her tone firm but not unkind. She'd read Morrison's report, every word of it. "I've never seen anything like this," she admitted. "This changes everything. We're no longer discussing treatment. We're discussing support." Grace nodded, still raw from grief. "So she can stay?" "Yes," Martha said softly. "With conditions. Weekly check-ins for 3 months. Ranger must be certified as a service dog within 30 days, not 2 weeks, and enroll Lily in communication therapy. I'm giving you extra time, considering everything." She hesitated, then added gently, "I'm sorry about your mother." After she left, John and Grace sat together in silence. Maggie was gone. Eden was suing. CPS was watching. And the loan shark's deadline loomed in days, but they still had Lily. They had proof she wasn't broken, just different. And maybe that was enough. That night, Grace's morning sickness was worse. She could barely stand. John held her as she cried. "I can't do this," she whispered. "Not all of it. Then we'll do it together," he said. "And if we fall, we'll get up together too." Somehow they survived another night, and when morning came, December 18th, the phone rang. A voice on the line said words that would change everything again. "Mr. Carter, my name's Patricia Chen. I read about your case. I want to help, pro bono. You're not alone anymore. Sometimes, the most extraordinary miracles don't come with thunder or light. They come quietly, through the voice of a child who was never supposed to speak." Grace's hands trembled as the camera light blinked red. "This is extraordinary," she whispered, her voice steady but soft. "This is our daughter. She's not broken. She's beautiful." That 7-minute segment aired on the local news that night, and by morning, it had become something much bigger. A family's story of love, loss, and a little girl who heard the world differently had reached millions. Phone lines flooded. Emails poured in. Families who'd spent years feeling alone finally found words that made sense. "My child does this too." One message read. Another. "For the first time, I don't feel crazy." Doctors reached out. Researchers wanted to learn. Dog trainers offered to help. But with light came shadow. Some accused them of lying, of giving false hope. Others called Lily's gift dangerous, even evil. The world had opinions, and it wasn't always kind. When the comments turned cruel, Patricia Chan, their lawyer and friend, called that night. Grace, John, don't read them. You're not fighting for approval. You're helping people who finally feel seen. That's what matters. By dawn, something incredible had happened. A stranger, someone who'd simply watched their story online, had created a GoFundMe for the Michael Morrison Foundation. By sunrise, it had passed $127,000. Grace stared at the number, tears blurring her vision. People believe us, she said softly. John nodded. No, they believe in hope. Then came an email, short, unexpected. Eden, the man who'd once tried to exploit their story, had withdrawn his lawsuit. No call, no apology, just a few words. I withdraw all claims. Keep the dog. Sorry, it wasn't forgiveness, but it was peace. Soon after, Patricia called again, voice lighter than before. Good news. CPS is reducing their supervision. Monthly check-ins instead of weekly. They're recognizing you're giving Lily the support she truly needs. Grace covered her mouth, crying quietly. For the first time in months, the world wasn't pushing against them. It was lifting them. January arrived with a clean slate and snow on the cabin roof. Using the donations and Morrison's contribution, they officially launched the Michael Morrison Foundation, a place for children like Lily and the families who loved them. Dr. Morrison became medical director, John the executive, and Grace led family outreach. 12 families came that first month. 3 children shared Lily's rare gift, hearing frequencies beyond human range, and 2 of those children found companionship through specially trained dogs, thanks to Morrison's research. When parents saw their children respond, truly connect, many simply cried. For the first time, they didn't feel alone. Then, in February, a documentary filmmaker reached out. She wanted to tell their story, Listening to Angels, the Lily Carter story. Grace and John hesitated at first, but Patricia helped them set boundaries. No sensationalism. No pity, just truth. Filming began in March. The crew captured laughter, tears, therapy sessions, and quiet family mornings, moments no one else had ever seen. Grace's belly grew rounder. Another child was on the way. John often paused mid-interview, eyes shining with gratitude and disbelief. Ranger stayed close to Lily through it all, her silent guardian, her link to a world no one else could quite hear. And then, one morning in April, something changed. Grace was cooking breakfast. John reading the paper, Lily sitting in her high chair, Ranger resting at her feet. Lily looked up, locked eyes with her father, and said it, her first word in normal sound. Da-da. John froze. The paper fell from his hands. Grace gasped, and Lily smiled. A proud, glowing smile that said, I did it. John rushed to her, tears breaking free. Yes, baby, he whispered, holding her close. Yes, I'm Dada. I'm right here. I'll always be right here. Ranger's tail wagged softly beneath them, as if even he understood what this moment meant. By June, Lily had 15 words in normal range. She could ask, answer, even say, I love you. She moved between 2 worlds, one human, one beyond. She wasn't broken. She was bilingual. July came with heat and new life. At 2 p.m., after a long night of labor, Thomas Henry Carter, little Tommy, was born. He cried loudly. A perfect sound. The doctor smiled. Healthy boy, normal hearing range. Grace exhaled in relief. But when Dr. Crawford suggested testing him on Lily's range, curiosity replaced fear. The results stunned them. Tommy could hear up to 35 kilohertz. Not as far as Lily, but far enough. Grace wept. He can hear her. They'll talk to each other. That night, Lily leaned over her brother, made a soft sound only Ranger could usually hear, and Tommy turned his head toward her. John whispered, They're already talking. It was a moment of pure, unbroken peace. A family once shattered due to hole. The documentary premiered at Sundance 2025 to a standing ovation. Soon it was streaming worldwide. Millions watched. Millions wept. Medical schools began using it as a case study. Research exploded. Families who'd felt isolated for years finally found each other. The Michael Morrison Foundation grew, helping over 100 families by spring. Dr. Morrison spoke everywhere. Conferences, hospitals, classrooms. He always began the same way. My name is William Morrison. 23 years ago, my son died because I stopped listening. I'll never make that mistake again. He'd show Michael's photo, then Lily's. Living proof that when we listen differently, we heal differently. And then came December 2025. Snow on the trees, lights on the cabin. Inside, laughter, warmth, and life. Grace and John sat beside the fire with their 2 children. Ranger, older now, graying around the muzzle, still guarded them like the angel he'd always been. Lily read a book to Tommy, mixing English with her unique frequency. Tommy gurgled, responding with sounds his parents couldn't understand, but could feel. Grace smiled. A year ago, we were dying, she whispered. John looked at her. A year ago, we were learning to live. We just didn't know it yet. The fire crackled. Maggie's photo watched from the mantel, her spirit still part of every heartbeat in that room, and then Lily looked up, said clearly, "I love you." She switched to her other voice, one beyond human hearing, and said something more. No one knew what it was, but everyone felt it, a truth that needed no translation. Outside, snow fell quietly. Inside, they were whole. Listening, loving, finally heard. Reflective outro, narrator tone softens. Sometimes the greatest love stories aren't about finding the perfect person. They're about never giving up on the ones who need us most. Grace and John Carter almost lost everything. Their home, their hope, their faith in each other. Fighting for a daughter the world said was broken. But she wasn't. She was just speaking a language they'd forgotten how to hear. So I'll ask you, what language is someone in your life speaking that you've stopped trying to understand? How many people around us are whispering for help, not in words, but in silence, in distance, in pain we don't recognize? It's never too late to start listening, to open your heart again, to hear the people you love, even in the quiet, because sometimes angels don't sing. Sometimes they just wait for someone to finally listen.